Welcome to Fractured Chaos.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. But what about the pictures that don't exist? The ones that were never taken? The empty frames on his wall told me more than any photograph ever could. I met Evan at a gallery opening in October, autumn in the city, where the air smells like possibility and dying leaves. The exhibition featured emerging photographers, their visions of urban isolation plastered across sterile white walls. Most attendees clustered around the large, provocative centerpieces, champagne flutes dangling from manicured fingers as they debated composition and social commentary. But Evan stood apart. He was studying a small portrait tucked in the corner, a woman with her back to the camera facing an empty window. Simple, overlooked. Yet he stood before it, completely absorbed, one hand thoughtfully stroking the stubble along his jaw. His focus drew me in like gravity. The way he tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something the photograph was whispering only to him. I pretended to admire a nearby installation while stealing glances. He wore a charcoal blazer over a simple white t-shirt, casual but deliberate. When he finally sensed my attention and turned, our eyes connected across the gallery floor, and I felt that electric jolt people talk about in movies, but I'd always dismissed as fiction. His eyes were the color of wet slate, observant and deep. "It's the negative space that makes it work," he said, nodding toward the photograph, speaking as if we were already mid-conversation. No introduction, no preamble. Everyone wants the subject to face the camera, to reveal everything at once. But mystery. He smiled, small lines crinkling around his eyes. Mystery is always more compelling. Within 20 minutes, we'd abandoned the gallery for a hole-in-the-wall wine bar 2 blocks away. Within a week, we were inseparable. Or so I thought. 3 months into our relationship, I realized I hadn't seen his apartment. We always ended up at my place, a cozy 1-bedroom with uneven floors and a temperamental radiator that clanged like a prisoner rattling tin cups against cell bars. I didn't mind. My space became our space, without discussion. His toothbrush appeared in my bathroom. His preferred coffee materialized in my kitchen cabinet. His sweaters draped over my reading chair. But his apartment remained a mystery. "It's being renovated," he'd say when I asked, the explanation sliding off his tongue with practiced ease. "The timing's not right." Later, it became, "My roommate is going through a bad breakup. It's a war zone of takeout containers and unwashed laundry. You don't want to see that." When I'd suggest meeting for dinner near his place, "I'd love to see your neighborhood," he'd smoothly redirect us downtown, away from wherever he lived. "There's this amazing Ethiopian place I've been meaning to show you." Or, "I made reservations at that French bistro you mentioned last month." Always thoughtful. Always specific enough to make my suggestions seem forgotten rather than dismissed. I didn't push it. I told myself I was being respectful of his boundaries. Progressive, even. Wasn't this what modern relationships were supposed to be? Space, independence, trust without possession. Besides, everything else was so good. The way he'd bring me jasmine tea when I was working late on design projects, how he remembered small details from stories I told weeks earlier, the languid Sunday mornings when he'd read the art section aloud while I sketched in bed beside him, the intensity with which he'd look at me sometimes, as if memorizing my features. Then came his sister's birthday dinner. "She's been asking to meet you," he said, tracing circles on my bare shoulder as we lay in my bed on a Wednesday night. "Dinner this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just family." I spent hours getting ready that evening, tried on 7 outfits before settling on a burgundy wrap dress that complemented my olive skin, straightened my usually unruly hair, applied makeup with uncharacteristic precision. I even practiced anecdotes in the mirror, charming, slightly self-deprecating stories that would endear me to his family without seeming like I was trying too hard. At 6:40 p.m., 20 minutes before he was supposed to pick me up, my phone buzzed. "Mike's family emergency, dinner canceled, talk tomorrow." No details, no follow-up call, just those 7 words and the hollow silence that followed. I tried calling, it went straight to voicemail. I sent a text asking if everything was okay, if I could help, nothing. The next day passed without word. No call, no text, just the unsettling static of absence. By evening, anxiety had crystallized into something harder. I opened Instagram, a platform I rarely used, and navigated to his sister's page. There they were, posted 3 hours earlier. His mother, father, sister, brother-in-law, all smiling around a cake topped with dancing candles at Marcello's, the Italian restaurant where I'd been planning to meet them. The caption read, "Another year around the sun with my favorite people." He'd untagged himself, but his sister had captured him in the background of the third photo in the carousel. There he was, raising a wine glass, looking directly at the camera. No emergency in sight, just family celebration without the inconvenience of me. That night when he finally called, I let it ring twice before answering. "Leslie?" His voice carried that perfect note of tension, concern wrapped in relief. "I've been worried. Why haven't you answered my calls?" "I didn't get any calls," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "Just the text canceling dinner." "I called 4 times," he insisted. "My phone shows the calls. Maybe there's something wrong with your service? You know how spotty coverage is in your building." Before I could respond, he continued, his voice dropping to that intimate register that usually made my stomach flutter. "It was awful, Les. My mother, she collapsed during dinner. I waited. We spent hours in the ER," he continued, filling my silence. It's not good." "What did the doctors say?" I asked, surprising myself with the direct question. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Cancer," he said finally. "Stage 4, pancreatic. They're talking about weeks, maybe months." I thought about the photo, his mother smiling broadly, one arm around his father, the other holding up a forkful of tiramisu in mock celebration. "I'm so sorry," I said, the words sticking like ash in my throat. "We're keeping it private," he added. "She doesn't want people treating her differently. Looking at her with pity, you know?" That night, he came over. I opened the door to find him standing there, eyes reddened, shoulders slumped beneath the weight of what appeared to be genuine grief. He stroked my hair as we lay in bed, his fingers tangling in my curls. "My mother is dying, Leslie," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "Stage 4. We're keeping it private. I didn't want to burden you with this. Not yet." And just like that, I became the villain in the story. The girlfriend so insecure, so needy, that she'd question a son's devotion to his dying mother. What kind of monster would doubt him in this moment? What kind of person would bring up an Instagram post while he was drowning in anticipated grief? I believed him. Or rather, I believed that I should believe him. That was the first time he made me question my reality. For the next 2 weeks, I watched him perform the role of devoted son with Oscar-worthy precision. He'd take calls in the other room, his voice a hushed murmur of concern. He'd cancel plans with careful reluctance, apologizing profusely while explaining his father needed help with insurance paperwork or his mother had a bad day with treatment side effects. Meanwhile, his sister kept posting on Instagram, vacation photos from Cabo, check-ins at spinning classes, and bottomless brunch. Not once a mention of hospital visits or ailing parents. I began to notice other inconsistencies. The work conference that ran unusually late on Thursdays. The college friend who always seemed to need emergency advice on Sundays. The way his phone would always be face down on the table. The calls he would let go to voicemail when we were together, only to return when he stepped outside for fresh air. The constant low-grade fog of doubt began to affect everything. I'd find myself staring at menus in restaurants, unable to focus on the words. I'd lose the thread of conversations, caught in mental loops of analyzing his latest explanation for a missed call or changed plan. My design work suffered. A longtime client gently asked if everything was all right after I submitted mock-ups riddled with errors. "Just going through some personal stuff," I'd replied, embarrassed by my slipping standards. "Take care of yourself," she'd said. "Relationships should add to your life, not drain from it." Was that what was happening? Was I being drained? Or was I the problematic one? Suspicious, demanding, unwilling to give him space during a family crisis. 2 weeks later, I found a key. Evan had come over after what he described as a brutal day at the hospital. He'd taken a long shower, something he often did at my place, claiming the water pressure was better than at his apartment. When I heard the shower running, something drew me to his jacket, hanging neatly on the back of my dining chair. I hesitated, hand hovering above the pocket. I'd never been this person, never checked phones or pockets or questioned whereabouts. Trust had always been my default setting, my point of pride. But the person I'd been before Evan now felt like a distant acquaintance, someone naive and slightly pitiable in her certainty. My fingers dipped into his pocket. I felt it immediately, a single key. No keychain, no markings. Just a solitary gold key. I took a photo of it, careful to note its exact position in his pocket before replacing it. Something inside me had started to shift. The woman who would have ignored red flags was beginning to see in color again. The next day, I hired a locksmith to identify the brand. It was distinctive enough. an old-fashioned Medico with a specific cut pattern. Once I had that, finding his address wasn't difficult. Property records are public, after all, and Evan Mitchell wasn't a particularly common name in our city. I told myself I was simply verifying information, making sure I wasn't losing my mind. The building was in the historic district, one of those pre-war structures with ornate stonework and a doorman who dressed like he'd stepped out of a Wes Anderson film. Elegant, established, far too expensive for someone who claimed to be a mid-level associate at a law firm. I stood across the street for an hour, watching residents come and go, half expecting to see him emerge or enter, confirming my suspicions. But the universe rarely offers such tidy validations. I crossed the street just after 2 p.m., during what I hoped was a shift change for the doormen. I nodded confidently to an unfamiliar face behind the desk, making a show of searching for my keys before producing Evan's from my pocket. "Forgot mine again," I said with a self-deprecating smile. "Mr. Mitchell is expecting me." The doorman barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Have a good day, miss." The elevator was mirrored brass, reflecting my face back at me from every angle. I barely recognized the woman I saw. Eyes wide with adrenaline, cheeks flushed with the thrill and terror of discovery. My heart pounded so hard, I was certain the neighbors would hear it when I stepped out onto the 9th floor. Apartment 9C, I stood before the door, key in hand, frozen between knowledge and confirmation. Once I opened this door, there would be no going back to blissful ignorance. The key slid in smoothly, turned with a satisfying click. I pushed the door open and stepped into Evan's reality. His apartment was immaculate, almost staged, like a model home in an upscale development. The furniture was mid-century modern, all clean lines and neutral tones, punctuated by strategic pops of color. A cerulean blue throw draped artfully over a caramel leather sofa. A single orchid, pristine white against the ebony surface of a side table. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view of the park that probably added several $100,000 to the property value. But what struck me most were the picture frames, dozens of them, on every surface, lining the entryway console, clustered on side tables, arranged in a perfect gallery wall. Him with his arm around a stunning woman with caramel skin and eyes like honey. Him with the same woman and an elderly couple, her parents presumably, at what looked like a holiday gathering. Him at a beach, at weddings, at graduations, always with her. The woman appeared in every photograph, her bright smile and confident pose a stark contrast to my increasingly diminished presence in my own life. Never with me, not a single image captured our 3 months together. The kitchen told its own story. A high-end espresso machine, 2 sets of monogrammed mugs, a refrigerator covered with save the dates, and wedding invitations addressed to Evan and Sophia Mitchell. Same last name, not roommates then. In his bathroom drawer, beneath precisely arranged toiletries, I found prescription bottles. 2 names, Evan Mitchell and Sophia Mitchell. Birth control pills, prenatal vitamins. The narrative was writing itself now. Each discovery, another sentence in an increasingly predictable story. A home office held more clues. A framed law degree, not from the state school he'd mentioned to me, but from Harvard. A professional portrait of him with senior partners from Jenkins, White & Chen, a prestigious firm where my father, Thomas Chen, was managing partner. The firm where Evan had apparently been fast-tracked for junior partnership, according to a congratulatory card propped on the desk. As I was about to leave, the door opened. But it wasn't Evan, it was her. Sophia, the woman from the photos. In person, she was even more striking, tall with perfect posture and the kind of bone structure that made even her obvious exhaustion look elegant. She wore scrubs beneath an open cardigan, a hospital ID badge still clipped to her pocket. And she was pregnant, visibly so, perhaps 5 or 6 months along. She didn't scream, didn't immediately call the police. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the exact same gesture I'd seen Evan make that first night at the gallery, and asked, "Can I help you?" Her keys were still in her hand. Her wedding ring caught the light. "I'm Leslie," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I've been dating Evan for 3 months." A flicker of recognition crossed her face, followed by something worse than anger. Resignation? "Of course you are," she said, setting her keys in a small ceramic dish by the door. She moved past me toward the kitchen, her pregnant belly leading the way. "Would you like some tea? This conversation usually requires tea." "Usually? You're not surprised," I said, following her. She filled an electric kettle, her movements precise and practiced. Turns out I wasn't Evan's girlfriend. I continued, the words bitter on my tongue. I was his mistress. And you're not just his wife. You're pregnant? 26 weeks, she confirmed, reaching for mugs in a cabinet. Girl, my second pregnancy this year, actually. I lost the first at 11 weeks. She delivered this information with clinical detachment. Earl Grey or chamomile? Earl Grey? I answered automatically, still processing her words. I'm sorry about your loss. Are you? She asked, but without venom. She was tired, bone-tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Sit down, Leslie, please. We sat at a small breakfast table overlooking the park. The afternoon light spilled through the windows, catching dust motes in golden suspension between us. He's done this before, she told me, cupping her mug with both hands. 4 times that I know of. You're the 3rd this year. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Always the same type. Type? Smart, creative, professionally accomplished, but socially. She searched for the right word. Unattractive, I finished for her. Insecure, she corrected. Women who shine in one area of life but doubt themselves in others. Easier to manipulate, less likely to demand to be part of his real life. Less likely to make scenes when they eventually discover the truth. I thought about my unruly hair, my tendency to duck my head in photos, the way I'd apologize before offering an opinion at work, despite being the most senior designer on the team. Why do you stay? I asked. She smiled thinly. Catholic family, doctor at a Catholic hospital, financial entanglements that would take years to unravel, a baby on the way. She shrugged. Pick a reason. They're all true and all insufficient. We talked for almost 2 hours. She showed me records of therapy sessions, couples, and individual, spanning 3 years. Evidence of Evan's promises to change. Documentation of previous affairs, each discovered, each forgiven after elaborate shows of remorse. He'll tell you I'm bipolar, she said as I was leaving, or that I'm jealous and controlling, that I imagine infidelities. That's his pattern when confronted. I believe you, I said, and I did. I should have felt humiliated walking out of that building. I should have crumbled under the weight of having been so thoroughly deceived. Instead, I felt something crystallize inside me, ice-cold clarity. That night, I went back to my apartment and set up everything. The camera hidden in my bedroom clock, the recording app on my phone. For 3 weeks, I documented every lie, every manipulation. I documented how he'd subtly critique my appearance before we'd go out. That top is interesting, he'd say, head tilted in consideration. Very bold, though maybe the black one would be more slimming. Always delivered with enough thoughtfulness that objecting would make me seem oversensitive. I documented how he'd check his phone whenever I was in the bathroom, his thumbs moving rapidly over the screen, all evidence of communication erased by the time I returned. I documented how he'd never introduced me to anyone we ran into. Friends became old college acquaintances. Colleagues became just someone from the building. Once, we literally bumped into a man Evan had described as his best friend from law school. Hey man, the friend had exclaimed, going in for a hug. Where have you been hiding? Sophia keeps saying you guys need to have us over for dinner again. Evan had smoothly introduced me as a client. He was running into for a quick coffee to discuss some design work for the firm. After the friend left, he'd squeezed my hand and whispered, "Sorry about that. Josh is the office gossip. If he knew we were dating, the whole firm would know by lunch." I'd nodded, understanding, accommodating, playing the role of the cool girl who didn't need labels or acknowledgement. One night, as he was getting dressed to leave, back to his roommate, he'd said, I decided to press further. "Why keep me hidden?" I asked, watching him button his shirt in my bedroom mirror. "Are you ashamed of me?" "What? God, no, Leslie," he replied, not looking at me directly. "It's not about you." "Then what is it about?" He sighed, a masterful display of reluctant honesty. "My family is very traditional, Leslie," he said, focusing intently on his cuffs. "They wouldn't understand someone like you." "Someone like me?" "Someone so unique looking. My mother especially. She has expectations. You've seen the photos of her. Always perfect. Always put together. She struggles with anything that doesn't fit her narrow worldview." I nodded as though wounded, as though his words cut deep. In reality, I was pressing record on my phone, tucked discreetly beneath my pillow. "And if they saw your Instagram," he continued, checking his hair in the mirror, "the blue hair phase, the tattoos, they'd never accept you." That was the moment I knew I had him. Here's what Evan didn't know. I'm not just Leslie, the graphic designer with an indie studio in a gentrifying neighborhood. I'm Leslie Chen, daughter of Thomas Chen, the senior partner at Jenkins, White and Chen, the law firm where Evan was gunning for junior partner. The blue hair and tattoos? From college, from a brief rebellious phase when I tried to distance myself from my family's legacy of practicality and achievement, photoshopped away years ago from most social media, except for the few posts I kept private. Posts I suddenly made public the night before his big interview with the partnership committee, the interview my father would be conducting. You might think this is about revenge. It's not. It's about consequences. The morning of his interview, I texted Evan, "Good luck today. Knock 'em dead." "Thanks, babe." Nervous but ready. Then I sent everything to Sophia. The recordings, the texts, the video of him admitting their marriage was complicated and that he'd been exploring options. I sent her the name of the best divorce attorney in the city, my cousin Jennifer, whose specialty was high net worth splits with clear evidence of infidelity. Then I walked into my father's office. The Chen family has never been demonstrative. We don't do grand gestures or emotional declarations, but we value honesty and integrity above all else. It's carved into the marble foundation of the firm's lobby, Veritas et Integritas. "Dad," I said, sitting across from his imposing desk, "I need to show you something before you interview Evan Mitchell today." I laid out every manipulative, deceptive thing Evan had done, not just to me, but to clients whose billable hours he'd inflated, to colleagues whose work he'd claimed as his own. My father listened without interruption, his expression unchanging until I finished speaking. "What do you want me to do with this information?" he asked finally. "Whatever is right for the firm," I answered. "I refuse to be collateral damage in a man's game. But I also won't tell you how to run your business." My father nodded once. "You've never interfered in my professional judgment before. I trust you wouldn't start now without good reason." He checked his watch. "Mr. Mitchell's interview is in 20 minutes. I'll handle it appropriately." I never asked what happened in that interview room. But Evan didn't get the job. The partnership went to Angela Kim, a brilliant attorney who'd been with the firm 3 years less than Evan, but whose case record was impeccable. Sophia filed for divorce the following week. Last I heard, she got the apartment, the car, and full custody of their daughter, born 3 months ago, healthy and beautiful, named after Sophia's grandmother, not Evan's mother, as he'd apparently promised during their last reconciliation. You might wonder why I'm telling you this story. Why expose myself as the other woman? The fool who fell for his lies? Because last week, I received a text from an unknown number. "Is this Leslie Chen? My name is Taylor Reeves. I need to talk to you about Evan Mitchell." Taylor was petite with a cloud of dark curls and kaleidoscope eyes that shifted from green to amber depending on the light. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. She sat across from me, fingers nervously shredding a napkin as she spoke. She'd met Evan at a gallery opening 2 months after his divorce was finalized. He was studying a portrait everyone else had passed by, a black and white photograph of empty chairs around a dinner table. He told her it reminded him of loss, of absences that can never be filled. He told her his wife had died in childbirth, that he was raising their daughter alone, that Taylor was the first woman who had made him feel anything since the tragedy. Something felt off, she said, pushing her untouched latte away. He never wanted me to come to his place because it would confuse his daughter, never wanted to introduce me to friends because it was too soon. Then last week, I saw him at a restaurant with his very much alive ex-wife and their child. When he went to the bathroom, I approached her table. She told me to find you. Taylor isn't the first woman to contact me. She's the 5th. We meet monthly now, me, Sophia, Taylor, and the others. We've created a network. We compare notes. We warn each other. We protect each other. Our most recent addition is Diane, a 42-year-old art history professor who met Evan at a faculty mixer. By the time she found us, he'd convinced her to invest $30,000 in a sure thing property development. The money vanished into an account we're still trying to trace. Laura was a talented chef who put her restaurant dreams on hold to support Evan through what he claimed was a wrongful termination suit. There was no suit, just gambling debts he paid with her savings. Maya, an emergency room nurse, believed she was helping Evan care for his dying mother by covering his rent for 3 months. The mother he claimed was dying of cancer was actually competing in triathlons in Arizona. Each woman was successful in her own right. Each had some insecurity Evan identified and exploited. Each believed she was the exception, the one who finally understood him. Each was isolated from his real life through elaborate compartmentalization. People like Evan rely on silence, on shame, on the belief that women like me, like us, will be too embarrassed to speak up, too humiliated to admit we were deceived, too afraid of judgment to share our experiences. But here's what I've learned. The most powerful thing you can do with a toxic secret is drag it into the light. We've created a database, documentation of Evan's patterns, his lies, his financial schemes. We've established a small foundation to help women recover funds lost to relationship scams. We host monthly support groups for those recovering from similar relationships. What began as a collective wound has transformed into a powerful network of solidarity and strength. I saw Evan last week at a restaurant with a new woman, petite, nervous smile, checking her appearance in her phone camera when he went to the restroom, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear the way people do when they're not sure they belong in upscale places. I watched him touch her hand across the table, his head tilted in that familiar gesture of complete attention. I watched him glance at his watch when she looked away. I watched him scan the room, a habit I now recognize as checking for anyone who might know his real life. I left my card with the waiter, just my name and a phone number. Sometimes, that's all it takes to break the spell. The woman called yesterday. Her name is Rebecca. She's meeting us for coffee tomorrow. So if you're listening to this and something feels off, if you're being hidden, if the excuses pile up like dead leaves, if your relationship exists in carefully controlled environments, remember my story. Remember that you deserve to be seen, completely. And if someone can only love parts of you in shadows, that's not love at all. When Evan told me I'd never meet his family because I wasn't attractive enough, he thought he was dimming my light. Instead, he lit a fire. And I'm not the only one carrying a torch. The ghost frames in our lives, the pictures never taken, the moments never acknowledged, tell stories far more revealing than any perfectly posed photograph. They are the negative spaces that define what's missing, the absences that speak volumes about what's real. Next time you notice an empty frame in someone's life, pay attention. It might just save you from becoming another ghost.